Hello everyone. I wanted to talk a little bit about a piece of software that I wrote that I spent the most amount of time out of all of my projects writing, and it's the most fully fledged piece of software that I've written, the most in-depth, and it's also the thing that I'm the most proud of having written. So a little bit of background. I worked on a dairy farm a few years ago, probably about 4 years ago at this point. And the way that we kept track of the calves, we had, back at the main farm, we had a piece of software that the owners used to keep track of the herd. And when a calf was born, it was put into the software, but it wasn't really used for the first 3 years of its life until it was ready to give birth and start producing milk. Mostly because the calves were raised at a farm down the road, so it was not conducive to use the software for that. And the software itself was more for older cows and more for keeping track of milk production and birthing schedules and stuff like that. So the way that we kept track of the calves was, when I first started, whenever a heifer was born, we would tag them and give them a tag number, and we bought our tags pre-numbered just because they looked nicer, and we would write their date of birth on the back of it. So that was really the only record we had of when these calves were born. So imagine having a bunch of calves, or really not even calves at that point, the time they're 2 years old or something, and they're all together in a barn running around together, and you're trying to catch one so that you can check the back of its tag to see how old it is. It was not something that was easy to do. And once their ears got to a certain size, it would cover that up, so you'd really have to hold their head and pull the tag up so you could actually read it. So trying to keep track of that was not very easy. We didn't really use their date of birth a whole lot, but it was good to know. And the other thing we kept track of was any medications that we were giving the calves. And the way that we did that when I first started was a desk calendar hung up on the wall, and we would write any treatments for the day in that. The problem with that was, once you got to the end of the month, you either had to fold the paper up and keep it out of the way, or you had to tear it off and try to store it somewhere. And the calf barn that we raised the calves at had a office area, but it was not the kind of environment good for storing things. So it was semi-open to the elements, and we had a bit of a fly problem in the summer, and we had a lot of barn cats that would be running around and keeping shelter in the office or in the calf barn itself. So trying to keep things in a place where they would be safe and clean and not get ruined was very difficult. So eventually we got away from the desk calendar and switched to a spiral-bound planner, and that let us keep track of a little bit more things. We could write more notes on it and stuff. But I really wanted to develop something that was better for keeping track of this stuff. To me, we needed more data on these calves, and especially for something like when they are changing diets or transitioning. We needed more data to keep up on who they are and when these things should happen. So the way that we did it was when they were born, they were their diet consisted of 100% milk. It was pasteurized milk from the treated cows in the main herd. So milk that could not be put into the main tanks. So we would pasteurize it and feed it to our calves. And about 6 weeks after they were born, oh, that was actually something that I changed. Originally, we weren't transitioning them until they were almost 3 months old, which I thought was way too long. Eventually, we got it down to 6 weeks. At 6 weeks, we started transitioning them off of milk, going onto a grain and water diet. So, and at night and stuff, between shifts, we would give them grain and water, and we would use that as an indicator of whether or not they were ready to transition. So if we came in and noticed that their grain was being emptied regularly, that would indicate that their rumen had started to develop and we could start transitioning them sooner. So I started writing a piece of software that originally all it kept track of was their tag number, their date of birth, and the list of treatments. And I used the date of birth mostly for what is shown on the screen right now, and that is their estimated weaning dates. So it showed on what day they started transitioning and they started receiving 3/4 milk, half milk, quarter milk, and we would mix the other half or the other portion of that with water to try to wean them off of just straight milk, and that would encourage them to drink more water throughout the day and eat more grain so they could keep their nutrients up. And it also gave an estimated date that they would be moved out of the calf barn to the transition barn. The reason that I wanted to start doing it this way compared to what we had was the way that we were doing it. The calf barn was sectioned off based on how it was built into groups of between 6 and 12 pens. And so we would try to keep the girls together close to ages, so that way we could transition a group of them at a time. The problem was when our capacity started to reach its limit, and we started to have to put calves in whatever pen was open at the time. So it was getting harder and harder to keep track of who was supposed to be, because normally we would transition a whole section at a time, so we didn't have to keep track of exact dates or anything. But I started doing this, and I was able to use their birthdays, and I wrote a little section of this program to generate a list, and I can actually show you on the weaning tab up here. It would show you who was going to be receiving what division of milk. And it was super useful. So I was able to come in once a week and generate that list and write it up on the board so whoever throughout the week was feeding them would know what to give them. From a coding standpoint, this program, I got to work with a lot of new things. So I had already worked with Windows and putting things into Windows and formatting and stuff, but the first time I did it, I made a Yahtzee program, and it was all very manual, in the code, writing things down to get things formatted right. This was the first time that I had started to use IntelliJ's form builder, which I fell in love with. Super easy to use, super intuitive for the most part. And so I started out with just that, and then I got to a point where I could add the tabs at the top, so calf info and treatments and stuff like that, and then I was able to do a sub tab for under calf info, so everything related to this specific calf could be selected through there. And then one of the most recent things was this toolbar right here, which I thought was amazing. So my toolbar buttons, let's go through those real quick. I have pretty intuitive for what they represent. Plus adds a new calf. The minus removes a calf. The pencil edits a calf. The needle adds a new treatment. This shows a weaning list, a more comprehensive list of who needs to be weaned on what. This one shows a list of calves that have yet to be dehorned. This button, if we notice that a calf, their rumen development has started, we could click this button and it would adjust a back-end number that would adjust all of these weaning dates, these estimates here. And it does that because all it saves is that back-end number. Normally it's 0, but you can adjust it here, and all of these dates are generated based on their date of birth and that back-end delay number. And then this button, save a full report on the current calf. This was originally intended to be used for, say you need a printout of a calf and everything about them. You would click this button, it would save a formatted text file, so you could print that out and give it to your vet or the person that's buying one of these calves. I never got it to do a whole lot, but it is there and it does something. So here, let's go to a calf that I know has some treatments. So we can take a look at these treatments. Not particularly useful. Let's go to Cora. So it shows their tag number here. You can flip through the calves with these arrow buttons. It would show, if you gave them a nickname, it would show here, and you can edit that here. You can change the name. It would give you the location, so it would tell you whether they are in the calf barn, if they're in the transition barn, or if they were moved elsewhere, if they were sold, if they expired. It would show up here. Gives you information if it's available on the dam and sire. Originally I did not have this information. I started writing it down around the time that 3210 was born, but I was able to get access to the software the herd manager used and print out a list all the way back to the 3000s, I believe, and that had their tag number, their birth date, dam, and sire on there. So a lot of these calves actually do have that information populated. So you can see here the dam was 2860 and the sire was unknown. So here, these checkboxes let you know at a glance what they have had done. So you can see she had both of her newborn colostrum, as well as her 4 newborn vaccines. At the time that I left, she had not had her 2 transition vaccines, but I believe she was weaned by the time I left. So, and you'll notice that these buttons are not editable. That is, so you don't accidentally click on one and change it without knowing. You actually have to go into the Edit Calf tab and select one of these things and click OK, and then it would populate, just as a safety precaution. If we go to the Treatments tab, it gives you a pretty good look at how this works. So the vaccines here are automatically input when a new calf is created. You choose what vaccines it receives, and it will automatically populate them in here. And then any treatments you do afterwards, you can see she was born on 4/9, and on 4/11 she had, she was actually, in her notes, the tiniest thing ever, also a red calf. She was the first red calf that we actually had in quite a while. And because she was so tiny, she had some pneumonia issues. So you can see here on 4/11, she got a XNL and tripectate, presumably because she was dehydrated and a bit warm. And then she had a continued treatment of XNL over the coming days. So you can see these ones were all manually entered. They were written down in the book. Here is where I started to use the program. So on 4/13 in the morning, I gave her a dose of XNL, and then I scheduled a treatment, which we will look at a little bit later, and that would show up in the Scheduled Treatments tab. We'll take a look at, so under the summary, actually under actions, so here's where you would schedule a treatment. So if you wanted to add a treatment, you would go here, and it would pop you up with this, a new treatment for 32/22. The date that you gave the treatment, it auto-populates with today. The time, our shifts were morning and night shift, so these would autofill with what time you opened the program. So right now would be about the time that we would feed them at night, so it would auto-populate with PM. You can choose the medicine, and it will automatically calculate the amount given and the route based on some information we have in the program about the medication, and it would calculate the amount given based off of the birth date. So it would take how old they are and compare that to a list of how heavy an average calf of that age would be, and it would calculate it here. Originally, I planned to do some actual measurements, so measuring different parts of the calf to estimate their weight and actually enter that information in here so that it would better calculate treatments, and also keep track of their weight based on averages, so you could see if they were under or overdeveloped. So you would select all this information, write down any symptoms they had that would trigger you to give this medication, select who was administering it, and you click OK. It would add it as a new treatment. One thing that pops up with only one of these is Mycotil. So you click on this one, it would pop up with an alert saying this medication must be administered by a licensed veterinarian because it is a very dangerous drug. I just added that as a little precaution to let anybody know that was doing this, hey, this is a dangerous thing, don't do it yourself. And if you wanted to schedule a treatment, so say I gave a calf a treatment today, needs to get one tomorrow, we can schedule it. So we would change this to tomorrow at night. We're doing 1 repetition, and say they were getting a second dose of Baytril, and you click OK, and it would schedule it for tomorrow, and that would appear under the Scheduled Treatments tab. So anybody that needed a treatment scheduled, it would show up here, and you would be able to select your name down here and click Administer All Treatments once you had done so, and it would go through and it would remove them from here and put them onto each of the calf one at a time. The herd treatments, I had this a couple years ago that we actually used this, so I'll have to scroll back. But the treatments tab under the calf info would show you all of the treatments for that calf specifically throughout its life. Whereas this tab would show you every treatment that any calf got on this particular day. So once we find an example, it shouldn't be too long. It should be here we go. Go back to one of the busier days. So you can see here was a scheduled treatment, but here is one that had some symptoms. So This would show who gave it, what their tag number was, what the medicine was, the amount, and any symptoms you had. So you can see 3217 was given 1.1 cc's of Draxin for pneumonia, as well as 3218. I believe both of them were in close contact with each other. You can see 3173 had a little bit of dehydration going on, got some LRS and some mineral oil. She was a larger heifer at the time. So that is how this works. The notes section, you can write in anything here, and you click save, and it would populate this radio button to let you know that it was saved successfully. You can use these arrow tabs to go through the different calves. Let's look at, so here it says expired, so this calf was 1 day old when it died. This age cuts off after the calf left. In order to change that, you would go to change status. Normally it's calf barn by default. So this one expired, we change it to expired, and it would pop up for expired and sold. It would pop up with this window asking you when the calf left and what the reason was, and it would populate the left date, change it to expired, and click OK, and all of that would change. And this is based on the amount of days between either their birthday and today, or if they left, it would be their birthday and the left date. Let's take a look at the weaning list. So we have this here that shows kind of a quick range of who would be on certain diets, but we also have this list here, which is more comprehensive and giant because there's a bit of a bug going on where it's putting the same calf in a whole bunch of times. But it would normally give you a list of anybody that would be on these things. The dehorned list works similar. This will give you a list of anybody who had not been dehorned. You can give this list to the vet, let them know these need to be done. The notes section, just an ASCII cow because we didn't actually use this for anything. But yeah, so let's do an example. We'll actually, so you can scroll through like this, or you can click the change calf button, and you can enter a number. 4,000 is my test. So say you wanted to remove a calf, you entered it in incorrectly or something, and editing is not would not be able to fix it. You can remove it, and the first thing it will ask you is the calf identification index, which would be their tag number, or their, in the case of some of the other ones, it would be a slightly different number. But say I want to remove 4002, I would type in 4002, hit OK. It says, are you sure you want to remove 4002 from the herd? You would click yes, it would remove it, and then it would go back. These are stored in numerical order, so it would go back to number 1. The heifers we had tag numbers for. The bulls we did not tag because we normally wouldn't keep them. We did end up having to keep probably about 16 of them at one point, so we started naming them so we could keep track of them, but in the program they needed an identification index, so I started numbering them from 1, and so you can see here they have all of their names in here and their identification number for the program. If you wanted to add a calf, you'd click this and it would bring you the new calf dialog. You would enter their birth date. It would automatically assume that you're entering a heifer, and it would give you the next highest number based on what tags it has. So the next highest was 4002, which we just deleted. You can choose whether or not they had certain vaccines administered. Whether you can write down the dam and sire here if you know them. And you can choose heifer, or you can choose bull, and it would give you the next highest bull number. So that's kind of a grand overview of the program itself, how to use it, stuff like that. One thing, there is a startup message. You can enter a message here. Yeah, you can enter a message here, and when you start the program up, it would pop up with that message first, and you have to acknowledge the message in order to get to the program. That way you could write a message to another user. Let's take a look at the code real quick. So I will switch to this view. So one thing I got to work on a lot with this was processing JSON files. So the cows themselves are all stored in a JSON file. Very big, long string of text. With IntelliJ, I can format it a little bit so it's easier to read. So you can see here, each cow object has an index number, which would be their tag, a date of birth, wean delay, a nickname, dam, sire, a left date, location, this bools, which we'll talk about a little bit. Bool, I think, is a leftover thing because I don't think anybody uses them. The treatments is a list, and each treatment object has a date, time, medication name, amount, symptoms, and administrator. Notes and who added it. So you can see each cow is its own object, and that correlates to this, and I got to learn how to pull those things in. Actually, the logic file is where I actually import everything, so I do all my JSON processing here. But the bools thing that we were talking about, so originally all of the checkboxes and stuff in the program, so all of these things were each stored as their own Boolean, written as plain text, true, false, for each one of these. And I was trying to reduce file size, so I developed a way to store all of that data as one thing, one piece of information. So each one of those checkboxes is just a binary yes or no, they had it or not. So I went to, not here, I already lost where it was. But if we go down here, I'll probably be able to find it here. Yeah, constants, bool type colostrum. Okay, so I had an enum here, which gave all of these different values, binary mask values for each of these. And this would set it using that mask and the data that you gave it, and it would store it as just a number. I believe if I go here, yeah, it would take it and it would just do a binary operation to update the values. And I thought that was super cool. It was really fun to wrap my head around what I was doing, how I could do it better. Because like I said, originally each one was its own line item, and with a file that is this long, to the point where IntelliJ doesn't even want to deal with how big this file is. Like, it is absolutely massive. It is actually 236,000 characters long, and if we format it, it's 19,900 lines long. So I definitely had to figure out a way to shorten it, and I think I did a pretty good job. I used a whole bunch of forms in here. So you can see here's the main window, and it's got all of its different tabs and how to format it and everything. It was really fun getting to work with these. I got to reuse some of my old code for adding text to text panes, and I did some work with text panes before and was able to do quite a bit with it in this. One thing I forgot to show off was the really busy day in the herd treatment. I will have to find it. It was February, I want to say February 17th of 2018. Where example of one of the windows I did not show off. Luckily, I was smart enough to add arrow key functionality to this page. So unfortunately, I was only able to use this program to gather 10 months of data. Oh, we had a big stretch where we didn't give any, and then we had some more, and there was one day where we had a bunch of treatments all together. And I think this was the day. So one thing I wanted to point out was, say you had to give a whole bunch of calves treatments of the same thing, and you didn't want to go, you don't want to go through every single calf and add the treatment. So we added the F11 function key to do a multi-treat, and through this you could write a range using a dash in between, or a comma separated list of calves, or a combination of the two. Date, the time, the medication, the amount, the symptoms, who it was given by, click OK, and it would go through each calf in that list up here and give them the treatment together. So it's a time saver. Yeah, one thing I was working on, you can see here I had a lot of enums that I was trying to work with. I never really got around to working with that too much. I was trying to work more with JSON too, and make a JSON list of medications with some more in-depth information. Like I said, I was going to try to measure the calves and calculate their weight, and use that to better calculate the amounts of medicines given. But I couldn't really wrap my head around what I needed to do to get this to be where it was, and what it ended up turning into was the medication enumeration, which is just this big list of all the medications and all the information you need for them, aliases, what all their names for them. But it would keep track of a lot of stuff, and I was pretty proud of how this turned out. I don't believe there's any other groundbreaking things. I don't think any of this was groundbreaking. I'm mostly self-taught with Java, so this was all me watching YouTube videos and hitting Stack Overflow, trying to find pieces of code to do kind of the same things that I wanted, altering them to fit my needs, which is a lot of what coding is. But yeah, I got to do a lot of new things with this program, and I got to develop my skills quite a bit over the 6 to 8 months that I worked on it. But yeah, you can leave comments what you think about it. Let me know what projects you've worked on that you are the most proud of, or what you learned the most from, or if you want to know more about this, let me know. I can share a little bit more. So yeah, thank you.